This country is moving very rapidly under Trump into an authoritarian form of society. You know, the founding fathers, way back in the 1770s, these were nobody's fools. And what they had fought the King of England, an autocrat, had all the power, and they said, you know what? We don't want that in the new country. We're going to set up 3 separate equal branches of government. And every kid in the 6th grade knows who they are. But Trump does not. And what Trump is doing now is trying every day to usurp the powers of Congress, to challenge the powers of the court. It is a very dangerous moment. The struggle against Trump, the struggle against oligarchy, which is led by Elon Musk, the struggle against authoritarianism, the fight to make sure that the working class of this country gets a fair shake, that is not going to be won here in Capitol Hill. It's going to be won by millions of people all over this country standing up and saying, you know what, we fought and died for democracy. We're not going to move toward authoritarianism. We fought to create a country that works for all, not just the billionaire class. That's the struggle, and I'm going to be active in trying to rally the American people to do just that.
You just listened to a snippet from Bernie Sanders' interview with Caitlin Collins on CNN, and I'm surprised that his comment right there isn't getting more attention, because not only is it alarming that another sitting U.S. senator is warning America that we are slipping into a dictatorship, but Bernie right there is specifically invoking the American Revolution in order to communicate to the American people that we're not going to be able to vote our way out of this situation. And I don't think that people truly grasp the implications of that. For all of our lives, we've been conditioned to think that political change begins and ends with presidential elections, but we are past that point now. And Bernie Sanders is gently trying to explain to Americans that those days are dead and gone. Trump has repeatedly talked about seeking a 3rd term, and judges like Allison Ide, who replaced Gorsuch on the 10th Circuit, are laying the groundwork to reinterpret the 22nd Amendment to let him run for a 3rd term. I mean, the official White House Twitter tweeted out an image of Trump wearing a crown with the caption, "Long live the king." He just signed an unconstitutional executive order stripping away autonomy from executive agencies, and rather than reading you that entire wall of text, I just want to let the Trump administration give you the most concise explanation.
Lastly, we have another executive order that President Trump signed relating to independent agencies. This executive order would establish important oversight functions in the Office of Management and Budget and its subsidiary office, OIRA, supervising independent agencies and many of their actions, and also reestablishes the longstanding norm that only the President or the Attorney General can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
That is not a long-standing norm, by the way. If only the president and the attorney general have the last say on what the law is, that's called a dictatorship. And we are very clearly headed in that direction, and Trump is doing nothing to assuage our fears that that is indeed the case, because it's what he wants. And Bernie Sanders is warning you, if you want your country back, you're going to have to take to the streets and take it back. And he is desperately trying to get people to realize that this is where we're at. And he's not just saying that on TV. He is literally doing a tour across the country to explain to Americans that the only thing that can save the country at this point is a political revolution. Common Dreams reports Senator Sanders launched a national tour to fight the oligarchy, where he is hosting town halls with residents in districts that flipped from Biden to Trump in 2024. And the message is clear. Donald Trump is coming after you too. So he's going across the country trying to explain this to people. The policies that Trump is implementing right now, it's going to destroy their livelihoods too, even though they voted for him. So he's trying to get them to mobilize to stop that and to take action before it's too late. And in a recent interview with Brian Tyler Cohen, Bernie Sanders also tried to make that case directly to Trump supporters, that now is the time to act because it's going to affect them too.
What I would say to Trump supporters are 2 things. Focus not on what Trump says, but what he does. And what he's going to do is cut programs that you and your families need. Do you really think it's appropriate to cut Medicaid substantially? Those are families, your families, may not be able to get the health care that they need. Your mother may not be able to get into the nursing home that she has to get into because Medicaid pays a substantial part of that. We're going to do away with aid to students who want to go to college. Your kids are going to have to go more deeply into debt. when we cut back on higher educational programs. So the other thing that I would say is that if you are an honest conservative, you believe in the Constitution of the United States, you do not believe that the richest guy in the history, in modern history, can go around unilaterally cutting programs that were authorized by Congress. So if you're a Trump supporter and you're a working class person, understand that they're going after you. And if you believe in the Constitution and democracy, they're also trying to undermine that.
Now, whether or not he'll actually get through to most Trump supporters is debatable because we are dealing with a political cult, but that's why he's targeting specific districts where voters flipped from blue to red, because those aren't necessarily the diehard Trump cultists that we're talking about here. Those are people who simply don't know why things are so bad, but they get a sense that things are pretty fucking bad. And, because they know that things are bad but don't know how to fix it, they go back and forth between Democrats and Republicans every single election cycle in hopes that one of the parties will finally do something to improve their lives, but it never happens. So they're in this endless cycle where, okay, well, the Democrat didn't do anything, I'll opt for the Republican. They're bad too, I guess we'll try the Democrats again. Now, this attempt by Bernie Sanders in going across the country is to raise class consciousness and get working people to understand that their enemies aren't each other. It is the oligarchy, right? And this attempt to raise class consciousness in working class people is the very first step to mobilizing a political revolution, which is what he wants to do. Because Bernie Sanders believes that if you can get regular working class people to see that the root causes to all of our problems cannot be solved with a top-down approach through our corrupt oligarchic political system, then maybe if people understand that, they'll finally opt to bypass that system altogether to actually accomplish systemic change from the bottom up. And to be clear, when Bernie Sanders talks about a political revolution, he's not talking about regime change or violence. He's talking about change enacted from the bottom up through different types of movements, right? A national movement that utilizes protests, civil disobedience, boycotts, work stoppages, and a national strike to shut down the economy until the change that they want is enacted. So the American people, what they can do is put so much pressure on elected officials that not even the harshest dictator can withstand it. And this has happened across the world, like we saw in the Arab Spring, where Tunisians ousted their brutal dictator Ben Ali. Like, it's not like dictators are immune to pressure. All of them are. It's just a matter of the people mobilizing and understanding that they do have all the power. They control the economy, and they can shut that motherfucker down if they choose to do that. Now, this whole political revolution was basically the crux of the message from Bernie Sanders' presidential campaigns. He made it clear that all of the things that he wanted to accomplish, like Medicare for All, for example, you can't do that through usual political procedures. There's just too much corruption to get members of Congress to do these types of things. I mean, Medicare for All, for example, I brought that one up. These politicians, they're in the pockets of health insurance giants who would happily bankroll them in a primary election against the pro-Medicare for All challenger. So they weren't afraid to lose their seats. They had the backing of the industry that helped them get elected, and that industry is going to help them keep those seats. So Bernie Sanders' approach was to bring his political movement to D.C., right? Get the people who elected him to target members of Congress who were refusing to implement the will of the American people. You target them aggressively with massive protests inside and outside of their offices. But in order to make that a reality, you first have to foster class solidarity among the people who are going to take to the streets, because if you don't do that, then they're going to fight each other and not the oligarchs. And during a 2016 debate against Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders explained why a political revolution was so necessary.
We have today a campaign finance system which is corrupt, which is undermining American democracy, which allows Wall Street and billionaires to pour huge sums of money into the political process to elect the candidates of their choice. And aligned with a corrupt campaign finance system is a rigged economy. And that's an economy where ordinary Americans are working longer hours for lower wages. They're worried to death about the future of their kids. And yet they are seeing almost all new income and all new wealth going to the top 1%. And then in addition to that, the American people are looking around and they see a broken criminal justice system. They see more people in jail in the United States of America than any other country on earth. 2.2 million. We're spending $80 billion a year locking up fellow Americans. They see kids getting arrested for marijuana, getting a prison, getting a criminal record, while they see executives on Wall Street who pay billions of dollars in settlements and get no prosecution at all, no criminal records for them. I think what our campaign is indicating is that the American people are tired of establishment politics, tired of establishment economics. They want a political revolution in which millions of Americans stand up, come together, not let the Trumps of the world divide us, and say, you know what, in this great country, we need a government that represents all of us, not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors.
And that message right there was potent because embedded in it was this admission that the establishment politics that we've come to expect just aren't going to suffice. The country is too far gone. Things have gotten too bad. The country is just too corrupt. And if we've learned anything over the last decade, is that Democrats very clearly aren't up to the challenge of fighting fascism. So we shouldn't wait around and expect one Democrat to come along and save us. That's not realistic at all. And I don't think that Bernie's goal is to get people to abandon electoralism. What he's trying to do is get them to understand that extraordinary times calls for extraordinary measures, and you can't just rely on electoralism to accomplish the change that you want. And that's more true today than it was when he said it back in 2016, because as unresponsive as our government was back then, it's even less responsive today, to the point where Congress, they don't even have control. There's virtually no oversight over the executive branch. And worse, they seemingly don't even have oversight over an unelected billionaire pseudo-agency. And Bernie Sanders explained this in his interview with Caitlin Collins.
Elon Musk is clearly running the show, the wealthiest person in the world, who has enormous conflicts of interests, who is helping to fund right-wing extremist organizations all over the world, who is looking forward to get massive tax breaks from Congress. He's running the show.
So if he's running the show, but not on paper, as they essentially argue, but you say in practice, he basically is, you're a co-equal branch of government as a senator on Capitol Hill.
I kind of thought so, but I think you have to explain that to the president.
Do you feel that you have oversight when it comes to what Elon Musk is doing?
In case you missed it, he said, of course not, which is alarming. This is why he's trying to emphatically explain to people that Americans have to take a bottom-up approach to politics in order to enact change, because there's just no going back to the way that things were. There's not even a going back to 2016. I mean, after seeing how much power Elon Musk has, other billionaires are going to be throwing even more money at both parties to be able to do what he's doing now. Pandora's box has been opened, and it's never going to be closed. The only way going forward to enact fundamental change is through a political revolution, because you can't expect a system as corrupt as ours to be the very vehicle that will enact the meaningful change that we need at this point. But the question is, how do you actually get people to become class conscious? Because people are selfish by nature and they don't care about anything but themselves. And Americans apparently don't even give a shit about democracy, as evidenced by the fact that they voted to elect Donald Trump when he was very clearly a threat to democracy. So, these warnings aren't going to resonate with them. If I say that Trump wants to be a dictator, they don't give a shit. So what do? You have to make it personal. And that's what Bernie Sanders is trying to do. You tie Trump's authoritarianism to their wallets. You explain why Trump is consolidating all of this power and letting Elon Musk hollow out government agencies. He's doing this because he wants to do himself what Congress has always been too afraid to do. Privatize Social Security, cut Medicaid, do things that are incredibly unpopular. That's just one of the many examples. Now, Bernie Sanders explained this game that Republicans play that is ultimately going to result in the death of Social Security. Now, that's one of many examples. He also talks about Medicaid as well. But with regard to Social Security, he's trying to explain to Trump supporters who also rely on Social Security that if they don't act now, that their Social Security is at risk as well.
We're hearing this line from the White House that tens of millions of people are getting Social Security fraudulently. Either they're dead or...
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second.
We've gotten no evidence of it, but I looked into this, and what we do know is that there's a lot of people that still remain in the database, but as far as people who are actually getting payments, it was 44,000 who got payments according to an audit that was done in 2023.
Out of how many millions?
There's tens of millions. So when they say tens of millions, that would be
this is what we are dealing with.
Security.
We're not only dealing with oligarchy, the incredible power of the very, very rich. We're not only dealing with a move toward authoritarianism, we're dealing with what is new to America. You know, politicians have always lied, nothing new about that. But the level that we're seeing right now, the big lie, over and over again, and it goes out, there's a big lie, and then it goes out on Musk's Twitter to, several hundred million people, repeated over and over again. And now the word is out there, people on Social Security, 150 years of age. Can you believe it? The whole thing is corrupt. It's broken. Well, where does that lead you, Caitlin? What's the next step? If government can't do anything, if Social Security doesn't work, if Medicare doesn't work, if Medicaid doesn't work, we're going to get rid of all of those programs, and we're going to give it over to the billionaire class to run it.
That's what you think they're ultimately trying to do.
Yeah, at the end of the day, not only do
Social Security.
they want massive cuts to programs for the working class in this country in order to give tax breaks to the very rich, and then they want to move to the privatization of every important government agency. I'm not saying they're going to go after Social Security tomorrow. They're not. But this is the groundwork. I mean, this is what you do. You destroy the credibility of programs that are complicated, programs that have tens of millions of people. This is the welfare queen again. Look at this person. They got this, they got that. Kill the whole program.
And everything that he's saying there applies to every other issue. I mean, think about it. They say that schools are too woke, and they're teaching your kids CRT and turning them trans and making them gay. So the solution, of course, is to push for private schools instead of public schools. The VA is too slow and unresponsive to veterans after we defunded it. Let's give the veterans vouchers to get healthcare at private facilities. Our regulatory agencies for airline travel, they've just fallen to DEI, so we've got to outsource governance to SpaceX. I mean, our entire government has devolved into one giant welfare program for large multinational corporations at this point. And the first step to getting people to go along with the privatization scheme is to make them lose faith in the program. And that's currently underway right now with regard to Social Security, which is why Bernie Sanders is sounding the alarm, because this is an issue that will bring over Trump supporters. Now, as Newsweek reports, the former Social Security Administrator Martin O'Malley is also raising the alarm about Doge, saying at this rate, they will break it. And they will break it fast, and there will be an interruption to benefits. And that is going to hurt people. Now, in a reasonable country, the people whose Social Security check was delayed would be pissed off at the people in charge because of that delayed payment. But the problem is that the Trump administration will use that as further evidence that privatization is the only way to save Social Security, since our government is too corrupt and too incompetent to handle it themselves. And you would think that, well, since he's in charge, he obviously is culpable for anything that happens to Social Security. But the problem is that a large portion of Americans on Social Security are going to believe that lie because they tune into networks like Fox News that tell them that lie. Because the right-wing ecosystem can easily flip the truth on its head and get them to think that the opposite of what's true is actually happening. And, I played this clip in yesterday's video, but it's worth watching one more time because I think that this Fox News host perfectly summarized how their media misinformation machine works.
Dana, we are waging a 21st century information warfare campaign against the left, and they are using tactics from the 1990s. They are holding tiny press conferences, tiny little rallies. They're screaming into the ether on MSNBC. This is what you call top-down command and control. You get your talking points from a newspaper and you put it on the broadcast network and then it disappears. What you're seeing on the right is asymmetrical. It's like grassroots guerrilla warfare. Someone says something on social media, Musk retweets it, Rogan podcasts it, Fox broadcasts it, and by the time it reaches everybody, millions of people have seen it. It's free money.
And that right there is what Bernie Sanders was referring to. So people are voting against their own self-interest, thinking that they're doing what's best for them. So you have to find a way to get people to wake up. But I mean, it's truly an uphill battle. But you have to plant those seeds, because once people become aware of the game that's being played every single time, it's not new, it is more difficult to unsee it, although regression is a possibility, as we've all learned. But that's why it's more important than ever to do what we can right now to build class solidarity, because it's a lot harder to divide and conquer us if people understand that we are fighting a class war. So Bernie Sanders' solution to all of this is a political revolution to effectively get people to become privy to the class war that's being waged against them and to finally stand up and fight back. Now, I think that Bernie Sanders is right. I actually don't see how the typical political process is going to help us. I think that that really is the only way to actually improve things, at least when it comes to systemic change. You're not going to get money out of politics through the system that is awash with money. So, we have to come to terms with that fact, but we also have to reckon with the possibility that it might be too late to save our country. Sure, political revolution in theory is something that has a very good chance of succeeding if enough people actually do take to the streets, but it might not. The harsh reality is that there just may be no going back to the way that things were after this. And I don't want to seem overly cynical and get you too down, but it's possible that this is a one-way street and we can't reverse at this point. With that being said, if we are going to salvage what's left of this country, I agree that Bernie Sanders has offered us the only way to do it, which is through political revolution at this point. And I think that if things do get bad enough to where people's livelihoods are completely destroyed, and once the bread and circus no longer keeps the masses distracted, I do think that they will be pissed off enough to take to the streets. I mean, if people aren't getting their Social Security checks and the money isn't coming in and they're not able to feed themselves, they will take to the streets. I mean, material deprivation is what catalyzes political revolutions and straight up revolutions in the first place in other countries. I mean, so it's possible. Either way, we're going to find out soon whether or not the American people actually do stand up to take their country back, won't we?
The Humanist Report is fake news. Mike only cares about Crazy Bernie and his wacky socialist ideas. Sad, very sad. I'm unsubscribing.